Hello and welcome back to the Sleepless Podcast, where I interview people that are much more qualified than me in just about every area. And a massive guest today, honestly, probably the biggest one so far. Unbelievable. Just run through the resume. Sports journalist originally, co-founder of Croc Media and the face of SEN, one of the most influential men in the sports media industry, Craig Hutchison.
Hello, Jared. What a great radio voice you got. Can we swap voices? You're custom built for the radio industry, so if your studies go the way that they seem to be, you're a natural, if that's being you choose. But sounds like you're a bit too smart for radio. You've got the digital down pat. How are you? Thanks for the invitation. McDonald's a long time partner of ours, and it's great to see you working in the system. And Bart, great contributor to the Macca's business, so at least I could do to join you today.
Exactly. I was going to say I have to give a shout out to Bart for this because this is sort of the reason I got here, and I'm in the lovely SEN studios, which is a little bit better quality than my study back at home. So,
well, it depends what day you get us, to be honest.
Not bad at all, but yeah, shout out to those guys for letting me in here. It's awesome to be here, and hopefully one day I'll be able to come back and maybe work here properly.
There you go. You've gone for the pitch early, which I like. Good to see.
One day that'd be good. Anyway, that's the dream.
Yeah, absolutely.
Running through your life and your career, you're obviously very, very well known in the sports industry in Australia. Everyone knows you. Like, you could sort of say it to anyone and everyone knows Hutchy, and that's who you are. You were born here in Victoria originally, and then you first got your job as a cadet journalist at the Herald Sun. How did you sort of get that job, and then how did that sort of transfer into the next part of your life?
In those days, they had cadetships, and they took about 8 a year, Jared. So I think in the first year I sat in the end of 1992, at the end of year 12, I missed by the side of a barn. So I think they might have shortlisted, 50 or 60 for the next round, and I didn't make that 50 or 60. And then the second time I went at the end of 93, I don't know how I stumbled through into the interview process, but I always thought the interview was my only real chance because I wasn't academically as smart as the others. And then I was a little bit fortunate in the interview, I think. There was on the judgment panel a wonderful editor at the time called Carmel Egan, who's well known in journalistic circles, and the wife of the then editor of the Sunday Herald Sun as well, Alan Howe. And Carmel was a country girl, and I think my best guess is took a little bit of empathy on me being a country boy who was having a crack, and so I was the last one picked. I was probably the speculative bet, I'd suggest, of the cadetship class, and you need a bit of luck along the way, don't you?
Absolutely.
And sometimes you got to create your own luck too, which you're doing today, so I admire and respect that.
Thank you very much. Really do appreciate that. After that, you then sort of moved into producing for the Big Sports Breakfast, and you also moved to Channel 10 and you did Triple M as well. From those early days, where did you sort of gain that ambition to then become sort of that sports journalist? Like, what sort of drove you to then join this career that you are in now?
In the cadetship class, in the cadetship era, there was 3 years where you had to do the cadet rounds.
Yep.
And in year 1, I started writing sport in my spare time and got it published. And in year 2, I got a 6-month secondment in the sport, which was rare at the time. And I felt like I did okay. At the end of that 6 months, I had to leave, though, and go back to doing the rounds that were less interesting to me. And they were pretty hard yards in those days. They were real hard yards cadetships. And then there were resignations around me among the cadet class. So I was falling, and then there wasn't a new intake coming in. So I was kind of going back further the more I got published, and I just didn't see a way through it. And I was restless to do sport, and that was ultimately what I wanted to do, and I just kind of went for it. So the opportunity I started doing Magic radio on the weekends in year 2 of my cadetship with Kevin Bartlett and Stephen Quartermain, and got a little bit of a taste for it. Did around the grounds a couple of times and those sort of things. And so in the end, when the opportunity came up to produce Breakfast with Kevin and Doc, I grabbed it with both hands. Yeah. And it was a great learning.
Yeah, with that around the ground stuff, that's such a cool thing. Like, I would love to do like the around the ground sort of.
Well, in those days there was a number of games on at the same time, so it was a real meaningful. And then also I used to barrack for the game I was at to run late, and so there was some, time out, a time issue or something. I was always like, "Oh, this means we might finish later than the game at Waverley."
Right. Yeah.
And then the last 2 minutes might be close, and they might come to me to call the last 2 minutes. So I used to barrack for the chance to call the last 2 minutes around the grounds, and it happened a few times. And there was probably a little chance to sort of show that I could hold my own, and away we went.
Just on that, was there any sort of game like in particular that you remember so well, like having to call the last 2 minutes, or like a game that was so awesome to be able to go around the grounds on?
I think I was the around the groundsman at the day Milburn and Silvani clash, but I might be misremembering that. But something in my head says that I was there that day and got to paint the picture of what happened and how.
That's very impressive.
But it was I liked it. You're on your own. You had the responsibility of the game, and generally they were pretty big games. Right? They played at the same time, so yeah, of
course.
And I grew up listening to loving all the around the groundsmen of the other stations.
That's what I love. That was what got me into sort of doing this now. I wanted to be a sports journalist, and I was like, well, first off, I wanted to travel the world and watch sport. I wanted to go to the World Cup, the NBA Finals, the Super Bowl, all that stuff. And I was like, I don't know how to get there because I'm broke. And I was like, well, what better way to do it than to get paid to do it? And I was like, what job gets paid to do it? Sports journalists, sports media people.
Yeah, it's a band after my own heart. Basically, I've lived my life for 25 years.
That's all I've wanted. I want to just be able to go and literally just watch sport, which is awesome.
Magnificent.
From there, you then moved over to Channel 7. You were there for around 8 years in the end, where you were a chief football reporter over there. Are there any sort of stories that you broke over those sort of years, or even the years after, that you remember really, really, like, or that you think were your favourite or your most influential and most important?
I'm not sure any of them were necessarily favourites, but there was a lot. It was a pretty eventful period of footy. Like the Wayne Carey story was the biggest that I broke at 7.
Yep.
And that was a pretty daunting afternoon, breaking the programming at 3 o'clock. But there are also other things that were, like Dennis Pagan to Carlton and Malcolm Blight sacking. There's a lot of things like that where you were on the spot with pictures, and it was I always felt, for whatever reason, that you had added more value when you were where the footy rights wasn't, because that was their product news. Exactly. And so if you look back through my television career, I was almost always, only for a year or two, where the footy wasn't. Yeah. Because I felt that you could add more value by being a connection point to the game at the venue, at the broadcast that didn't have it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's just like, I remember like listening, and every time I've always been following sports news and everything like that, and all the breaking of the stories is just my absolute favourite thing to do. Like I spoke to Mitch Cleary and I had Tom Morris on as well, who were both obviously great stories.
Both outstanding journalists.
Yeah, so just like also hearing all those stories that they can break it's awesome too.
How old are you, Jared?
I'm 18.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
You got the world at your feet.
It's just finished year 12 last year. So
well done.
Yeah, thank you very much. So obviously you spoke about the Wayne Carey story. Are there any sort of like other shocking ones that you remember, or just like other stories that were really important to you or for your career to then further on at all?
The one that I probably springs to mind because he was a childhood idol of mine, and as a kid I drove from Warragul to Geelong with the lady who ran the local video store, a lady called Gwen Price, wonderful lady, to watch Gary Ablett Senior play. I felt blessed that I got to have the back end of the Gary Ablett Senior years, and it was a 2.5 hour drive in and 2.5 hour drive out. Sometimes if Gwen was a bit tired, we'd stay at her sister Noreen's and Pat's place, and they were good memories for me as a kid in year 11 and year 12. So I loved Senior. He obviously went through a very high-profile incident that remains sensitive to this day, and not here to kind of pass comment on that one way or another, because it was by his own admission a really shocking thing. Yeah. But I did get a sit down with Gary Senior. And probably the first public time he'd spoken, albeit years after the Alicia Horan incident, and at a church in Geelong on a Sunday night. I think the backstory to that was he had been in hospital. It was Geelong's 125th year of their major event. Yep. They'd asked him to do a video for the night. He had thought that he would potentially... I think what happened was he thought he could actually get one of the networks to film it because he's in hospital, his message of goodwill for the night, and then perhaps look to work with the network on that interview. It was misinterpreted at the time or interpreted correctly, whichever way you look at it, by Channel 9, and so he was angry with Channel 9 for whatever reason, maybe unwarrantedly. I was at 7. He rang the newsroom and offered us the interview, which was very out of character.
That way.
And I thought it was a G up by my mates, and I drove down and interviewed him in a church and then sat there for several hours afterwards, and it was quite bizarre to sit. And then I remember being on a Queen's birthday Sunday, because on the Monday morning I came to work with the tape at Channel 7, so I got 40 minutes of Gary Ablett on tape talking about life, and they were like, no, that didn't happen. I'm like, no, it kind of did last night.
I was going to say, that would set a career in stone, almost, having an interview with, Gary Ablett Senior.
It was quite bizarre, and I wish I still had the tape, because I think about it from time to time. But anyway, that was one that springs to mind for whatever reason, Joe.
That's massive. That in 2006. So
my big learning from that.
Yeah,
he always the private behind the scenes.
Of course.
He always said he didn't pay effort or attention to the media and what they'd said about him. But what I was struck by was just how much he knew about what had been reported about him and by who.
Yeah.
So it was like he was a student of the media.
He knew,
which was the exact opposite to what I expected him to be.
Yeah, I thought he'd just be sort of cut off, and you'd almost try and avoid it.
Yeah, you heard the stories. He didn't know his teammates' names, and he was big. He just did his thing, and I couldn't believe that he, so and so said this and so said that, and the time that so and so reported this, and he remembered everything about his career. And
yeah, that's incredible. In 2006, you then founded Croc Media, which is the beginning of where we are now, and where you are now as well. When it first began, could you have sort of ever imagined what it turns into like now, and how amazing this whole SEN business has become and everything?
I was really naive, so I had probably too much confidence in it. And in hindsight, knowing now what I knew then, I should not have had nearly as much confidence in it as I did. But for whatever reason, I felt like we would work it out, even though the first couple of things we did we were pretty unsuccessful at. Yeah. There were times clearly when you thought, this is going to come to an end, or the run's over. Early days, and there was one of the hard things building a business is trying to fund it as you go. Yeah. Because that's you inevitably fail before you succeed in any business you build, because you need revenues to catch up to your ambition. So there were some really tough times. There were bridges where you didn't think, but I kind of always thought we'd find a way to work it out. And but I'm proud that we've got this far. But just get very lucky to work with really talented people. You look around the room here, and there's just talented people everywhere. So I feel very lucky.
I know, I was actually sitting out in the reception before, and I was kind of I try and not be starstruck when I'm trying to interview people, because I'm I want to just talk to them really naturally. And I sat out in the reception, and then Jared Healy, Sam McClure, and Campbell Brown all walked past me, and I kind of just froze a little bit.
Oh, don't worry, I still do the same. Jared.
I really tried to play it cool, and I gave Campbell a little bit of a smile, but I was freaking out sort of thing. But even just sort of walking in, I was saw the big SEN, Sports Entertainment Network bit written on the front door, and I was like, wow, that's cool.
Oh, good on you, mate. They're nice words.
Oh, it's an amazing company, and my dad listens to SEN all the time, so when I told him about this, he was very, very excited for me as well. Almost probably more excited than I was.
What's his favourite show?
Oh, he likes AFL Nation. He likes just listening to the call of the footy. He thinks it's probably the best call that he can possibly listen to during the games.
Well, you can now get it live in real time in stadium. Yes, so there you go.
I actually need to try that out. I didn't try it out when I went to St Kilda, Melbourne, because I was too sad. I'm a St Kilda fan, and I was very upset when we were getting beat by Melbourne. So I just was not really into my phone that much.
That's right.
But I do need to try it out next time I get down there. Anyway, I've seen it.
Give it a go, Jared.
I will. I'll let you know. I'll report back to you on how it's going.
Thank you.
You've now expanded north sort of with SEN. You're now covering Super Rugby, State of Origin, NRL. How big do you think this can get, SEN can get? And do you want to cover heaps more sports and all these different things? And what's sort of next for the company as a whole?
Yeah, it's easier said than done, because we're, I guess, quite lucky when we merged with the then Pacific Star Network 3 years ago that SEN and the people who long before us had built a following. They'd done a great job. So we were a little bit fortunate that we were building on the work that had been done rather than beginning it from the ground up. Yep. We've been syndicating content through regional New South Wales and Queensland in particular for over 10 years, and feel like we know those communities reasonably well. That said, Sydney and building 1170 is a whole new challenge. It's a big challenge.
Of course.
It's it hasn't ever worked before in sport, not certainly on scale, and the opportunity is to prove a few wrong, and it's going to take time and ultimately plenty of time. So, our digital offering and ultimately But radio behaviours have moved to digital consumption. Like you would listen to, I would assume you listen to your content on your phone more than you do on the radio.
Yeah, most of them. Also because my radio is very, very bad. But
but so when you consume our content, it'd be by a phone, right?
yeah, the app. Yeah.
Yeah. You listen to this in app?
Yeah. That's the
And you
one.
flick around the tiles?
Yeah.
And you've probably got AirPods, have you?
Yeah, I sure do.
So that's the modern consumer.
Yeah.
Not necessarily on the radio.
Yeah.
The industry metrics don't catch that or allow for that like they should or would.
Of course.
And that's part of the challenge as well.
Of
So
course.
it's all part of the challenge.
Yeah, but being able to sort of transfer that, like the success that you've had sort of in Victoria and then be able to move it north is something that's really, really admirable. Being able to sort of turn the whole country into, being able to cover all the sports and wherever you are, you can listen to a certain thing and it's...
Yeah,
it's
we're
really,
trying to be
really cool.
a personalised experience for you wherever you are. And New Zealand's next. So
Yeah.
we're going to have a crack in New Zealand and do our absolute best there. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Just quickly before we sort of wrap it up and everything, doing our research for this, I went back and I watched probably the greatest video of all time, which was you kicking that goal in the EJ Whitten Legends match. I was at the game that day.
Oh, yeah?
Yep. I was sitting on level 2 with my sister, where it was the greatest goal of all time, personally.
Well, the best part about it now is that I've got an 11-year-old stepson, and I just dine out. He's just sick of it. I just dine out on it every time. I probably didn't mention it for about 3 years, and now I mention it every day just because I just love to get his reaction to it. And he rolls his eyes at me. He goes, he's sick of it.
It's the best.
Yeah.
The commentary's the best. Everything is just so good about
It was
that.
pretty funny. I remember being unbelievably scared on the night. I looked around at the back line, and mostly people I'd done negative stories around, and they were all big guys too. There's Carey and Rashudo and Michael and Barnard and a whole bunch of people that had my measure. So I was quite daunted, and then I just still don't really know how it all came to be. But anyway, I think looking back on it was a bit of a laugh and a bit of fun, and I love the algorithm in YouTube which surfaces it.
Always comes up.
Yeah.
Always comes up, no matter what.
So it's a good one to sort of dine out on with my stepson Nicholas,
It is very, very
who
good.
laughs. And so, yeah, whereabouts were you that night?
I was level 2 on
Yep.
kind of on the wing, but closer to a 50, but the other side of the ground.
Oh, yeah.
So I wasn't right.
The goal came from the wing, really. It was about
Yeah.
95 metres out, so you would have had a good view of it. It was probably the biggest goal. It was bigger than Blight's
I
torpedo.
think so, yeah. I think you got blights by about 20.
The other good thing about that night was, I think they were 40-metre arcs, not 50. But
Yeah, they were. They had the two.
If
You
you
can
look
see
at
it
it
on
on
the
video,
video.
it looks like I've kicked it for nearly 50.
You can see the video. There's like the white one
Yeah.
and the normal 50,
Yeah.
which is really good.
And my great mates were calling it, which was very funny. So
that was awesome.
bit of fun.
Thank you so much for
Jared,
doing this.
Our pleasure. Good luck with your career.
Thank you very much.
You've got a natural digital bent. You've got a great radio voice. So I'll be following your career with great interest.
That would be awesome.
And you're in a very good university system there at Deakin. So best of luck with it. And,
Thank you very much.
My best to Bart, who's a great man.
Yes.
And thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for that. It's awesome to be able to come to the studio and do this, and it's been really a pleasure to be able to interview the great man himself. So
Thanks, Jared.
no worries. Thank you.